So, for the second time in about a week or less than a week, the Miami Dolphins have seen one of their great leaders leave the team. First, it was Calais Campbell signing as an unrestricted free agent with the Arizona Cardinals. And now it's Terron Armstead, the five-time Pro Bowl left tackle, announcing his retirement on Saturday night at an event in Miami. Probably not a great surprise in either case, even less so in the case of Terron Armstead. The writing had been on the wall pretty much since the end of last season, or at least the last several weeks, based on comments made by Mike McDaniel starting at the Combine in Indianapolis at the end of February, early March. And end of February actually was where he said he was proceeding as though Armstead would not be available to the Dolphins. So now it is official. Again, not a big surprise. Armstead just finished his 12th NFL season with more injuries, running out of body parts to list in terms of what he dealt with last year was a knee. And good buddy Hal Habib and former guest of the All Dolphins podcast and future guest, assuming Hal is willing to join, was at the event on Saturday night and said that Armstead related that he was told he's going to need knee replacement surgery, wanted to play through it last year, which is why, again, this wasn't the first time. He barely practiced, but usually found a way to get into the lineup on Sundays. Wound up playing 15 games last year for the Dolphins. That actually was the most he played in his 3 seasons with the Dolphins. Remember, he joined the team as an unrestricted free agent in the offseason of 2022. And here's the truth. The dude played really, really well for the Dolphins. Anybody who thinks this is not a big loss for the team because, he was always hurt. Yeah, he was always hurt and didn't practice very much when he was on the lineup. More often than not, if not all the time, he was the best offensive lineman on this team. There were moments when other guys may have taken that spot, maybe Connor Williams at times during his 2023 season, maybe Robert Hunt at times as well during that season, but clearly, without question, over the past 3 seasons, easily, by far, the best offensive lineman on this Dolphin team was Terron Armstead, injuries and not. In fact, there's a piece on Miami Dolphins on SI.com that I encourage everyone to check out. If you look at the annals of Miami Dolphins, not going to find that many better offensive linemen, left tackles than Terron Armstead, offensive lineman, period. Tackles even more so than Terron Armstead. Richmond Webb probably would be the gold standard in terms of tackles with his 7 Pro Bowl selections in each of his first 7 seasons. Jake Long also was a great player for the Dolphins. For anybody who wants to bitch and moan about the fact that the Dolphins should have taken a quarterback at number 1 overall in 2008, fact remains Jake Long would be in the Hall of Fame had it not been for injuries that derailed his career. Terron Armstead was on that level because he was so good as a run blocker and in pass protection. The other thing he brought to the Dolphins was some leadership on a team that doesn't have a ton. And this is where I mentioned Calais Campbell as well at the start. Losing Campbell and Armstead is going to create a leadership void, and this is not a team that has a ton of great leaders, if we're going to be honest about it. And the argument could be made that the leadership wasn't present enough last year to the extent where you need teammates to tell grown men that they need to take care of their business. But you look around this roster, who are the leaders on this team? You look at the team captains, it's Alec Ingold, it's Zach Sealer, Tyreek Hill was a team captain last year, Tua was a team captain last year. But is there anybody you look at, as this screen is phrasing, is anybody you look at on this team that screams leader the way Calais Campbell and Terron Armstead did? No. Now let's talk about the void it creates on the offensive line. Again, this is not anything that was unexpected. So the expectation all along was, should have been, and continues to be that Patrick Paul is going to take his place at left tackle. And this suggestion that you see in certain mock drafts and national mock drafts where analysts are saying the Dolphins will have to replace Terron Armstead. Well, that's why they drafted Patrick Paul in the second round of the 2024 draft. They knew this day was going to come, probably sooner rather than later. It's not completely different than what the Dolphins did when they drafted Cam Smith in the second round of the 2023 draft. knowing that Xavier Howard probably wasn't going to be with the team for that much longer. The thought when they drafted Cam Smith was he could step in for Howard when Howard moved on. That hasn't panned out. The Dolphins are going to be in bad shape if the situation repeats itself with Patrick Paul. We have a very sample size from which to evaluate or try to anticipate what's going to happen. Paul played 17 games with 3 starts in 2024 as a rookie. Play was spotty. There were some moments where he looked every bit the part of a franchise left tackle. There were other times when he looked like a rookie who needed a lot of seasoning. If the Dolphins are going to be drafting an offensive lineman in the 2025 draft early, the possibility certainly does exist that it could be a college tackle who would have to be moved to left guard or to guard as a rookie before eventually moving back to tackle at some point for somebody else if it doesn't pan out, either with Patrick Paul or with Austin Jackson, at right tackle at some point. But it's going to be bad, and especially in terms of resource allocation, if the Dolphins wind up having to use somebody who's going to replace Patrick Paul because he's not up to the task of starting at left tackle. And this is a problem that's really hurt the Dolphins the last couple of years, is they're not getting enough in terms of new players stepping up to replace the ones who leave. That happened with Xavier Howard, where instead of being able to count on a young player they had drafted, i.e. Cam Smith, they had to go sign Kendall Fuller for a decent amount of money and then wound up releasing him after 1 year. And now we're back to square one at cornerback opposite Jalen Ramsey, where there's a massive need. And this is a spot that could be filled in the first round of the 2025 draft, or possibly through another stopgap free agent alternative, such as maybe Rasul Douglas or Stephon Gilmore are the 2 guys who I mentioned. There's reports out of Las Vegas now that Jack Jones is going to be released. But again, as with a player like this, ask yourself, why is he being released? Back to the offensive line and Patrick Paul. Again, we don't know the problem. We don't know exactly what the Dolphins have in Patrick Paul because the sample size is not big enough. Not everybody was sold on him as a prospect coming out of the University of Houston. The hope is that the Dolphins hit it. But we're going to have to find out. So it's not a great position to be in, but this is shaping up as a tough rebuilding, retooling job for the Dolphins in 2025. And I addressed this as well on Miami Dolphins on SI.com, which I always encourage you to check out. They're in a tough spot. They have a lot of different needs. The offensive line clearly is one of them. Chris Greer said in his end of season press conference that he was going to get serious about addressing the offensive line. So far, the signature move was signing James Daniels as a free agent to handle one of the 2 starting spots at guard. They also re-signed Liam Eichenberg, which we all know didn't make a lot of fans terribly happy. But the idea with Liam Eichenberg, based on the talent on the roster, based on the contract they gave him, is that he would serve as a backup more so than he would as a starter again in 2025. Beyond that, the most pressing need from where I sit are cornerback, because you cannot have a patch job at one spot in the starting lineup. It's too important a position. The interior of the defensive line with the Dolphins currently have only 4 players on the roster. One who's a bona fide top end NFL starter, that being Zach Sealer. Benito Jones is serves as a serviceable nose tackle. And then the other 2 guys are depth players, Matt Dickerson and Neil Farrell. Safety also can be mentioned, although I'm not sure it would rank quite as high in terms of the priority list, because I think the Dolphins may try to see what they have in Ife Melifonwu, Ashton Davis, Patrick McMorris, the rookie 6th-round pick out of Cal last year, and maybe even Elijah Campbell, who the Dolphins re-signed. But it's still a need, because it would be nice to have a little bit more of a comfort level with whoever they bring in, and then you have the offensive line. So anyway, but this is about Terron Armstead. As I look back on his signing as a free agent in 2022, the big headline was 5 years, $75 million. As it turns out, he wound up playing 3 years. He's going to wind up making about $48 million for the Dolphins. And yes, there were a lot of injuries, games missed, practice time missed. Bottom line, he was a very, very good offensive lineman for the Dolphins. And he can go into retirement after 12 NFL season with his head held high. He was a top 10 left tackle in the NFL pretty much his entire career. I don't think it's quite Hall of Fame level, but it's certainly Hall of very, very good level. And for that, he should be proud. So Terron Armstead, hat tip to you. Would guess there could be some broadcasting in his future. He's done that a little bit. And he's a good dude with interesting things to say. He's also very involved in business. He's also a musician, so he's got a lot of things going for him, which probably played a role in his decision to retire above and beyond just a physical issue, and eventually at some point deciding enough's enough and what he's put his body through, including the last 3 seasons. Whatever you want to say about Armstead and his injuries, he sucked it up, played through a lot, and gave the Dolphins 3 pretty solid years. So that's going to wrap it up on Thoughts on Terron.